Hi, this is Joel Boggess, one half of the Relaunch team, and you are listening to the Bob Nolly of the Labrador Leadership Podcast.
Nice. Live from the RVA, this is the Labrador Leadership Podcast with Dr. Bob Nolly, the program that brings you the leadership skills that can make you the most authentic, approachable leader for the sake of your business, your team, and for you. Now, here's Bob.
Hi there, folks. Welcome back. How are you? I hope everybody's saying I'm great, Bob. And I hope you are. We have a great episode here today with the leadership freak himself. And when we get into the points that Dan makes, you notice how important it is we talk about the leadership shift that's been going on. We'll talk about the command and control style where leaders get employees to do things because you have a task, it's a job, because I said so. And the shift that's going on to more of a servant leadership style. And he has some great points about environment and other things as well that we'll get to. But I just want to make this point before we start it. It's really a mind shift. Now, there are lots of things that we've mentioned in episodes that you can listen to today and use at work tomorrow. But there are some episodes that are really going to take some time for you to sit and think about and chill on. And because you take that time to sit and chill on it, that's where the potential opens up for you to be a better leader. One more thing before we get started. Once again, I want to acknowledge folks that have been so kind to us in the ratings and reviews. Great actionable information was the name of somebody that said. Short segments packed with info. That's really nice. That's exactly what we're trying to do. Thanks a lot. B.A. Trout, leadership for everyone. Boy, that's just so great to hear that. Seems like if we're not hitting the nail on the head, we're getting pretty close. Joel says, informative and entertaining. Wow, we're flattered. Alex and I both. That's good. Freelance 21, thank you for your comment. A business coach for high performance. Wow, that's great. Thank you so much. Should be bowing deeply at this point. That's all good. Thank you all. Now, the whole point of doing this today and acknowledging the folks that have left comments is, yeah, please leave one, because during these early weeks of the show on iTunes, Apple is very supportive of folks that are new and put us up in the new and noteworthy section. And one of the things that does that, gets us moved forward, is you subscribing. So click that subscribe button if you haven't already and leave a nice rating and review for us, because that tells them that we're important and we can keep doing these stuff for you. And so take the time to do that, and we'll talk to you more about what we can do for you and the new cool things we have coming up. So it's about that time. Please sit back and enjoy Dan Rockwell here. He's a real leadership freak. Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, if you were one of those people that wanted to start a blog and you just couldn't get more readers than 50, your family and friends, or maybe 100, you consider yourself a huge success. But the gentleman on the line with me today is somebody that has accumulated an audience of over 300,000 readers. 300,000 readers. And he publishes daily, and he's called himself the leadership freak. Dan Rockwell, welcome to the program, sir. How are you?
Thank you, Bob. It's great to be here. I'm doing real well, staying warm these wintry days. How about you?
I'm trying to stay warm as well, and we can't get winter out of here fast enough. So tell us about the name The Leadership Freak. How did you fall under that umbrella?
Well, I wish I had a great story for this, Bob, but I really don't. I was noodling around with words about 5 years ago now because the blog is in its fifth year. And the word freak can be like sports freak, so it doesn't have to be freak like psychological basket case freak. And that's really kind of where I'm at on this. I'm like a leadership fanatic. And, I fell on the term, and people tell me it's memorable. And so I'm glad I did.
It is excellent, and I'll freely admit to you here that when I went to search for the name for the program, Leadership Freak, when that showed up as already taken, I went, "Who has that?" And there you were. When I was doing my doctoral work at school, there was a group of colleagues that were always running around to the events that had leadership as the subject matter, and the faculty branded us the Leadership Junkies. So you would be an honorary member of the Junkies for sure.
That would be
being
great.
A leadership freak. Your whole experience in leadership, you say, started out as a nonprofit. Was that your first real job when you had leadership responsibilities, or where did this all start for you?
It did. I mean, I think leadership is part of life, and whether it's you're playing Little League and you have the opportunity to lead the team, or in high school or after. But for me, I went away to school to theological training to begin with, and have spent a good part of my life in the nonprofit world leading there.
And I think when we look at the earliest leadership possibilities, youngsters could have today, it would be on a sports team, perhaps. I remember Boy Scouts being an opportunity as well. And for those of you that never went through a scouting program, you go through ranks, and when you get to the higher ranks and start earning merit badges, the whole point of that is to not teach you how to make a tower from trees and by tying lashes and ropes together to get that done. It's about, I think, learning project management and life skills, because the conversations you have to have with other leaders and merit badge counselors and the like are all about learning those interpersonal skills. And when you have to do that 21 times or 25 times, whatever the requirement is, all of a sudden you have some feet underneath you that'll serve you going forward.
Bob, I have Boy Scouting in my history as well. And when I think back about the things that impacted me, there were people there's a long line of people in my world who I think of as leaders because they influenced me. And one of their main things that they did is they believed in me, and they gave me their time, and they gave me their attention, and they made me feel like I could be something. And Dave Olmsted was our scoutmaster. I have no idea where he is now, but those scouting days were very formative for me.
Yeah, they're important, and I think folks that had the opportunity to go through them have the upper hand at some point down the road. So, do you feel that leaders have to be born, or can they be made?
Well, I'm going to go with John Maxwell on this and say, have you met a leader that wasn't born yet? And I remember I asked him one time, about this, and he has a standard joke that goes that way. But I think leadership skills can be learned. Obviously, that's why I'm writing, and that's why I have hope for my own leadership. I believe that we can learn to be better, and so it's a learned skill, I think.
I kind of think the born part comes from not the genetic pool, but rather the development that you are given during the wonder years, so to speak. How much encouragement and an opportunity you have, prior to becoming an adult at the age of 18. Then after that, it is learned, and it's more career based. I think it's do you get stretch goals and assignments? Has somebody taken you on as a mentor that help you learn those skills as you move on to the career? Because that painful stuff, that's growth.
Yeah, so it's so interesting that you bring this up, because I didn't realize at the time all these people that were pouring into my life before I went off to college, when I was, in those really formative years. Today, decades later, I think back on, you brought up the Boy Scout experience, and I hadn't thought of this for a long while, but there are those teachers and youth workers and neighbors and people who, sports coaches, all of them poured into this young kid. And, at some point, and it took me much longer than in my 20s. I mean, it was way later before I started really getting serious about learning about leadership. But they did pour in. And it makes me think about our opportunity, your opportunity, Bob, my opportunity to spend some time with these young, high potential leaders or people who could be leaders. It's such a joy.
It's a privilege. It really is a privilege.
Yep.
I think if we talked about leadership traits, I mean, we started measuring this, the researchers did in the 50s or earlier, and we come up with things like conservatism and prone to action and intelligence. But, as society has moved on, the list starts to look a little different. And I think Jim Kouzes and Posner and those guys have come up with things like empathy is at the top of the list now. And one way station in this whole leadership trait is servant leadership. And I think that's an important topic. And within the course of the episodes we've done so far, my audience has not heard about servant leadership, but I will share that with them soon. But it's important to you in your work.
It really is. I love what Pat Lencioni says about this. Pat Lencioni said, I'm sick and tired of hearing, and this is, by the way, a loose quote, but I'm tired of hearing about servant leadership. There is no other kind.
It's absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's absolutely right. And the premise is leaders cannot lead until they have served, and leaders should be serving through their work. And that's kind of a big picture thing. But day in and day out, what does a servant leader do?
A servant leader is consumed with what is best for the people on the team and the organization. And it's an extremely freeing sort of orientation toward leadership. The command control style is very stressful, and it's about pressure and maybe manipulation, but it's about getting people to do, what you want them to do, and a very leader-centric sort of style. And the servant leader is a other-centric style that says, what are your strengths? What are your capacities? Where do you best fit in? And how do we maximize your potential in a way that takes you where you want to go and takes our organization where it wants to go? And it's extremely freeing. So you walk into a room and there's a problem. And perhaps the old style leader is like, I need to solve this. I need to have the answer. And the servant leader walks in and says, how can I help?
And then the whole pitch of the room changes. I just read one of your more recent postings, and I had in the back of my mind this thought that leadership is now all about relationships. But now you make the case that it's about the environment. How is leadership about the environment now?
Yeah, I wouldn't jettison relationships just yet, Bob.
Oh, no, I'm going to loop back to that. Good.
Yeah. It was Peter Senge, who talked about our main point of influence is the environment we create. And I'm finding this to be such a useful idea. So in an organization, as a leader, I'm constantly monitoring what the environment is like and what are the energy levels like and what can I do, even from a structural point of view or from a rhythm and system point of view, to create an energizing environment that sets people free to reach their potential. And it can be as simple as a rhythm of every morning the leader drops into his direct reports or her direct reports offices or wherever and says good morning and talks about the day for a minute and says, can I be helpful in any way? And off they go. Or as Doug Conant, the former CEO of Campbell's Soup, who now has an office in Philly, and I talked with him and some of his people there. Every day when he's in the office, he stops in at the end of the day and thanks them personally for something that they're doing. That's an environment. That's creating an environment. Sure, it's a behavior, but the environment of affirmation, the environment of excellence, the environment of high energy, those are things that leaders need to be thinking a lot about.
And indeed about the relationships as well. I think the great leader is one that will have conversations with as many people as they can, not just their direct reports, whether you're a line manager and you've got a team of administrative people working with you, or you're up in the C-suite and you're looking at the top leadership team and you get them together. Skip a level or two and talk to those people and find out how they feel and ask that question, what can I do for you? And when you make those, I've known organizations to create this skip level concept and everybody gets excited about it, but then they get canceled because there's an urgency that creeps up. Mm-hmm. And that commitment to do that is somewhat less than holy. So that's a loss. That's a loss right there. I was just at an event with the Leadership Mix, which is Gary Hamel's group. Mm-hmm. And he talks about recently, as others do, about hacking management and turning the pyramid upside down. So on the pyramid, we have the top of the organization at the top of the pyramid, and the bottom, the line right there, is this broad base, but they are holding up the weight of the entire organization above it as they have to execute in delivering to the customer, whether it's a service or a good. And having to do that and close the deal is kind of problematic. So when you flip it, they're at the top and the whole organization is supporting the line, if you will, the worker, the administrative worker. And in that gap between that worker and the customer, that's the opportunity to make the magic happen. And that is, at least now for me, that's what I mean when I talk about the focus needs to be on those relationships right there.
Are you thinking, Bob, about the relationships between the frontline people and the customer? Is that what you're thinking about?
In that case, yes.
Yes. Yeah.
And
I love that upside down pyramid thing, because to aspire to leadership is to aspire to serve more, not be served more. I love that.
That's absolutely correct. And I just think it's great to have the urgency and the ability to just, if you are in an office setting and everybody is in little cubicles, to just walk down the aisle and pull a chair that's not being used and pull into somebody's cube and sit knee to knee with them. I always like to recommend people go knee to knee and have a conversation about how you're doing. What can I do for you?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, how will that person feel that you cared enough to do that?
Absolutely. I think, Bob, it speaks to this quality of the servant leader that is about openness versus being protective and posturing and having to have everything together. There's this openness of the servant leader that is interested in the welfare of others. I work with organizations on creating coaching cultures, and I think there's a strong tie between servant leadership and coaching style leadership. And I had suggested to their managers to try these little short coaching conversations that start with what's working for you and why, what is it about that that's working, and what are you doing to make it work, and how can we have you do more of that, and how can I help? And so they came back after in between sessions and reported on these little short conversations that you're talking about. And they had this little structure, and they're so excited about it because their employees are like, when they say, for example, one of them said, I asked, how can I help? And the employee looked at me and said, just the fact that you're interested in asking is really all I need.
That's excellent.
Isn't that great?
Yeah. We're with Dan Rockwell, the leadership freak. When you mentioned the coaching environment and trying to getting that infused in the organization, outside of the environment, coaching itself, why do you think some leaders are reticent to get a coach? Is it an ego thing? Is it what is the reason? Do you know?
It might be, it might be the ego thing. Like there's something wrong with me, and in that case, I think it speaks to the misunderstanding of what coaches do. And when I lead coaching workshops and help people think about this for themselves, I'll say that I coach my wife. And of course, everybody looks at each other like, really? And how does that work? And the reason we have that kind of visceral response is because we still assume that the coach is the person who knows everything and has all the answers and tells people what to do. And that's not what coaches do. Coaches help us bring out our best. And you don't have to. Matter of fact, Tiger Woods has a golf coach. Well, I guarantee you that golf coach doesn't play golf as good as Tiger Woods, but yet the coach can see things and help Tiger see things and help him bring out his best. So I'm totally committed to this idea, and I wish there wasn't discomfort with it, because coaching isn't counseling. Coaching isn't because somebody is a loser. My first coaching experience years ago when I worked for a Penn State affiliate, they asked me to meet with this manager that they wanted to expand her capabilities, and they tried for a couple of years and it didn't work. And so we sat down to have coffee, and I just sat across the table and said, "Why? You know why we're here, don't you?" And she said, because I'm a loser, and they want me to do this, and I haven't been able to do this. And I looked back at her and I said, "That is not why we're here. We're here because they believe you're worth it." And I honestly think it was that moment that was transformative for this manager. So the coach is somebody who helps people bring out their best, and we shouldn't be pulling back from this idea.
And that would have been a great moment indeed. Well done, sir. Well done.
Yeah, thanks.
You talked about, I saw a great clip on your website, a talk you gave on a moment of self-reflection as we sat here talk about the coldness of winter here. Can you tell that story about self-reflection before I ask you just, how important that is in the self-development of a leader?
And now, are you speaking about Harry Kramer's story, or?
I'm being silent for 3 days.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Harry Kramer wrote this book on values, and he is the former CEO of Baxter Pharmaceutical. And he helped me realize about authentic leadership and the idea of self-reflection. He talked about meeting his girlfriend, and they kind of fell in love, and the family heard about it, and they invited him to come during Christmas break. They were college students, and Tom Jansen was to be his future father-in-law. He didn't know it. Anyway, he got invited to Minnesota in the wintertime, and Tom Jansen met Harry at the airport and said, "I have plans for us." Well, at that stage, I'm not sure if he's got a gun in his pocket or what. I'm ready to run, But Tom Jansen took Harry Kramer on a 3-day silent retreat. And Harry said, "I hadn't been silent for 3 minutes, much less 3 days." And when I wrote about it, I said, the first line was, "I just hung up the phone with Harry Kramer and my ear's on fire. He is a machine gun talker." So it was very transformative for him. And he said, I learned about self-reflection. And I think this idea of spending a little time in quiet and just jotting down your thoughts can be so helpful on the leadership journey.
And for 3 days, I think he said it was a highlight of his young career so far, was it not?
Well, what he said is, and at that time, it had been 28 years or so since the first one he went to, but he said, "Dan, every December, it doesn't matter where I was in the world," and he would travel all over the world for Baxter. "Every December, I went back to Minnesota, and I have never missed that 3-day silent retreat since." Now, I don't know if that's true in the last few years, but that was his experience. It was so powerful for him.
That's excellent. That's quite an excellent story. I just read a piece, and I can't attribute it, which is probably a reason for me to not bring it up, but I still bring up the topic at this point, on mindfulness and the role of mindfulness in leadership. And I think we're a long way away from having executives and top leaders going off to meditate in the middle of the day to refresh. But I think there's a place for that concept somewhere in taking care of one's inner self so they can be the best they can be.
Yeah, and what you just said is so where it's at. We kind of think that this navel-gazing thing is like, I don't know, create self-indulgence, and maybe it does for some, but the idea that you do this so that you can lead better. You do this so that you can see your world better and you can see yourself better, and kind of come back in versus constantly pushing out. And for those of us who are extroverts, I think we really struggle with this.
Yeah. Somewhat, for sure. Somewhat, certainly. So you get your hands on a newly minted MBA coming right out of one of the finest business schools. What one piece of advice would you give them?
It's not about you. And I think about my early leadership years, and I thought it was all about my performance. It took me so long to learn that it really was, my performance is really about their performance. And the better I can help my team perform, the better leader I am. So in that sense, we move ourselves off of center stage and out of the spotlight, and we move others onto center stage and into the spotlight and maximize their potential. And that's what leaders do.
That's well put, and that will be a good spot for us to end the leadership discussion today. Just a couple of quick questions now, so my audience, the Labbies, can get to know you a little bit better. What kind of music's loaded on your phone or your iPod now?
I listen to books. When I'm with my wife, we listen to music, usually Pandora, and it's can be, classic rock or old style Christmas, which we just come from. But when I'm alone in my vehicle, I listen to books.
So yeah, classic rock. You couldn't be the leadership freak if you didn't listen to classic rock, I think. So what are you reading either on the Audibles or on your bedside table now?
I'm listening to The Essentialist, excellent book on basically do less better, and don't spread yourself too thin. Really am enjoying that book. I'm going to talk with John Bell. He has written a book called Do Less Better, which is in that same theme. So I guess I'm on a binge, and I'm really excited to read and talk to what is the name of her book? It's Act Like a Leader, Think Like a Leader, which she's kind of attacking this idea of you have to think, you learn to think as you act is what she's about. And I'm really, really excited to talk with her and read that book.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. Folks, you've been listening to Dan Rockwell, the Leadership Freak. Dan, if people want to read you or get in touch with you, where can they find you?
Well, the blog is at leadershipfreak.wordpress.com, and my email address is dan@leadershipfreak.com. I'm Leadership Freak on Twitter. You just type in Leadership Freak, you're going to find me.
And that's what branding's all about, folks. Dan, I can't thank you enough for being here for our listeners. Please come back anytime.
Bob, it's a pleasure to meet you and to spend some time here. Love to talk about leadership, and thanks for letting me do it.
The pleasure's all ours.
Thanks for listening to the Labrador Leadership Podcast. For the sake of all the special people in your life that deserve you to be the best leader you can be. Connect with us on our website at LabradorLeadership.com, on Facebook at Labrador Leadership, and on Twitter at Lab Leadership. Now, here's a final thought from Bob.
Friends, that's an adult dose right there. Dan Rockwell, many, many thanks for coming on the program. Hope to see you again soon here. Show notes are at LabradorLeadership.com/9. You can read all about it there. And we'll see you the next time. Alex will be back talking about feedback. See you then. Have a great week.